She said, "It's just dinner with my ex, stop overreacting." 2 weeks later, she moved in with him. I am a 35-year-old man, and the last normal sentence my girlfriend said to me was that line about dinner, "It's just dinner with my ex, stop overreacting." She said it in a tone people reserve for telling you to calm down in a museum, as if my concern might knock over a sculpture. 2 weeks later, the key she'd copied without telling me no longer fit anywhere in her life because she'd moved into his apartment across town. My toothbrush, still damp from the morning we were supposedly fine, stared at me like a witness. The night she announced the dinner, she was tying her hair in the hallway mirror, phone face down on the entry table. The dress was one I didn't recognize, black with a tiny gold thread that caught the light. She smelled like the sample vial she'd been saving for something special. I asked who else would be there, and she laughed. "We're adults, Ben. People can talk. We were together 6 years." He asked to catch up. She breezed out with a kiss on the cheek that didn't land anywhere. There's a particular humility in asking for reassurance and getting condescension back. I told myself I trusted her. I told myself to be generous. I cooked pasta for one and watched a documentary I would forget by morning. At 9:42 p.m. she texted, "Running late. Don't wait up." At 12:18 a.m. she sent a photo of the restaurant sign like proof of virtue, as if the existence of the location cancelled the lateness of the hour. At 2:06, she slid into bed with a sigh and said, "God, he's a mess," and fell asleep before I could decide what kind of mess she meant. Her name is Maya. We met 3 summers ago at a friend's rooftop party where the music was too cool for me and the plastic cups too flimsy for her. She had a way of telling stories that invited you onto the stage with her. I was the practical one, the man who brings a knife to a picnic because someone always forgets. We fit like mismatched puzzle pieces that somehow made a picture. I brought steadiness, she brought air. In the second year, we moved into a 1-bedroom with a view of an alley where the neighbor's cat conducted mysterious night business. We learned each other's morning noises. We bought a plant we named General Fernan. We were, to anyone glancing in, exactly what keeps apartment brokers in business. The cracks didn't look like cracks at first. They looked like, "We're busy," and "We'll talk later." She started working later hours. She wore perfume to the grocery store. She took a sudden interest in the gym on Sunday mornings she used to save for pancakes. When I checked the shared calendar, her entries had shifted from specifics to atmospherics: meeting, catch-up, errands. Once I joked that errands sounded like an alibi. She smiled without her eyes and called me paranoid. I made a little timeline in notes, not because I didn't trust her but because my brain behaves better with a map. Dinner with ex, Friday. New dress arrives, Wednesday. Uber receipts to a neighborhood that isn't ours, 3 in the last month. I added a question mark next to each one like punctuation could save me from being a cliché. When I brought up the pattern, she called it data collecting, like I was AP coursework and she was too creative for tests. There were other tells, the boring kind that don't make it into movies. She started turning her phone face down every time she set it on the table. Her passcode changed from our shared birthday joke to something that made her thumb move twice. The email account we used for bills began to filter messages a different way. When I asked if she wanted to split the electric, she said she'd get it later, and later kept dissolving. I went for a run the morning after the dinner that was just dinner and tried to leave the doubt on the asphalt. The river was slick gray, runners passing each other with the rude kindness of city morning. At home I found her sitting on the floor with General Fernan, coaxing a curl of brown from a leaf. She looked up, fresh, rested, as if the night had been a spa. "Feel better?" she said. She meant, "Are you done being inconvenient?" 2 days later she asked if I could be flexible about the weekend. "Ava's dog needs a sitter," she said, naming a friend whose dog doesn't exist. I offered. I said yes because I have a compulsion to be useful. Saturday she left, for Ava's, with a small overnight bag and the perfume again. I reorganized a cabinet that didn't need organizing and tried to make usefulness feel like power instead of understudy work. Sunday afternoon she texted, traffic, and didn't get home until nearly 10. The overnight bag looked heavier on return. You always notice luggage, she teased, and kissed my forehead like I was a good boy. When she finally said the words about moving, she said them like someone reading from a brochure. This isn't working, she began, washing a plate that wasn't dirty. I need space to be who I'm becoming. She added that the last 2 weeks had made everything clear. She didn't like who we were as a unit. It took my tired brain a full minute to decode that the last 2 weeks included 2 dinners, 3 late nights, and the way I had become a mirror she didn't want. I asked if there was someone else. She made a face like I'd burped in church. It's not about someone else. It's about me. I can't do this emotional labor for us both. Then, as if kindness, this move, I blinked. This move will help us both grow. Move? I repeated. She set the plate down, dried her hands, and said the apartment across town had a second bedroom she could use as a studio. It's, like, transitional, she said. The name of the ex didn't arrive until she said the cross street and my brain provided the rest. I said nothing and everything in the quiet that followed. Don't make this into a betrayal, she added softly, almost sorry. We're adults. We can be modern. The next 48 hours were cardboard and tape and the small humiliations of watching someone handle your mugs like they're already not yours. She took the Dutch oven her aunt had gifted us. She took 2 of the 4 chairs. She took the Artemide lamp she had called too cold when I bought it and now called mid-century. She left me the couch because the couch gave her hives, she said so, and the couch believed her. I asked about the lease. I'll keep paying my half until it's up, she said, and kissed the air near my cheek. You know me. In the first week of Not Her, the apartment sounded like a rehearsal space between acts. Friends texted and I gave them the abridged version. Half said, her loss. The other half said, relationships are complicated, in a tone that meant, we're going to keep following her on Instagram. At work, my focus was a pizza box on a windy day. I'd start an email and find myself staring at the part of my desk where her keys used to land when she came home. On day 9 I found the receipt for a storage unit in her name, 3 weeks before the just dinner. On day 10, the bank notified me of an address change request on the shared card I'd forgotten we still had. On day 11, I saw a story on her friend's page, brunch on a balcony I recognized from a night 3 years ago when she'd taken me to a party in a building with a doorman who said, "Welcome back." In the background, bare feet up on a rail and the corner of a tattoo I had learned the first winter we were brave enough to swim in the ocean. When I finally wrote her an email, calm, bullet points, the legal tone I hated using in love, I asked 3 precise things: when the last of her name would be off the bills, whether she wanted her bike, and whether we could coordinate a pickup for the stuff she was forgetting. She replied with a paragraph about how transactional language made her sad and then answered none of the questions. Please don't nickel and dime our history, she wrote. I closed the laptop and laughed, one short bark, because I hadn't cried yet and the human body needs a leak. I made my own little court, not of law but of documentation. Photos of empty drawers, dates, a scan of the lease with her initials, an export of our shared calendar that proved errands were a continent. It felt ridiculous and necessary. People talk about closure like it's a store you can visit and pick something up. My store sold forms and long breaths. 2 weeks after the dinner that was just dinner, a mutual sent a screenshot of Maya's caption, "New chapter, new space, light pouring in." The photo, her bare feet on that balcony, General Fernan on a new windowsill. Comment from the ex with the tattoo, "Welcome home." I put my phone face down and sat on the rug because the chair looked like something you sit in when you still believe in vows. That night I walked the long way to the bodega because the long way owed me a favor. I bought a loaf of bread I didn't need and 3 bananas that would go brown before I remembered to eat them. The guy at the register said nothing, then, as he handed me change, said, "You look like someone pulled the plug on your Friday." I wanted to hug him for naming it so simply. At home, the key rack had one empty hook like a missing tooth. I took the hook down and filled the hole, then hung a small framed photo over it, the ocean in winter, gray blue and honest. When I woke at 3 to the silence that used to be 2 breaths, I stared at the ceiling and counted the small, boring things I still had: rent paid, the plant still alive, the fork she always put in the wrong drawer back where it belongs. None of it moved the grief. It did, however, keep me in the room. The next morning, my landlord called to remind me about the lease renewal. "You two re-upping?" he asked. "Half of you two moved out," I said. He whistled, low and sympathetic. "Ah. The economy of love," he said. "Well, I need you to sign solo or find someone by the end of the month." And there it was, the financial chord that always sounds right after romance changes key. That afternoon she texted, "Can you send my blue sweater and the art books? Also, if you're going to keep the couch, maybe Venmo me for half?" I stared at the screen until my eyes watered. Then I wrote, "Happy to bag your sweater and books. Per the lease, you owe half the rent through June. We can net out the couch from that." Dots appeared. Disappeared. "You really can't be generous," she finally wrote. "I am being generous," I replied, and pressed send before I could soften it into something that made me more likable and less safe. She sent her cousin to pick up the sweater and the books, a woman with a kind face who looked at the floor like it might tell her how to be. I'd bagged everything, folded like I was applying for a job in retail. "She says thank you," the cousin murmured. I nodded and said she was welcome. I did not say what else I'd found: the letter from the storage facility confirming she'd rented the unit the week before the dinner, and the email to the building across town requesting a copy of the pet policy. "We don't have a pet." "He does." Photos of a rescue mutt with impossibly human eyebrows that Maya had always loved to imitate. If you've never had the experience of being cast as the unreasonable one while someone else rearranges your life, let me describe the choreography. You will receive messages that translate as, "Why are you making it hard to be kind to you while I hurt you?" You will be told to take the high road by people in helicopters. You will learn the exact shape of your dignity by how it feels to hold it when your hands are shaking. I stuck to paper. I sent a short, sober email to the landlord asking for the roommate release form. I sent Maya the prorated amount she owed with a neat little spreadsheet attached. I set an auto-transfer for my end of the bills and removed her name where the companies would let me without a notarized letter. Where they wouldn't, I wrote the letter. Where they wanted her signature, I forwarded the form and wrote, "Please sign by Friday." She replied with a poem about how ugly money made love look and added a line about hoping I could return to the best version of myself. I pinned it to the file called Record because that's where pretty sentences look the most out of place. Friends picked sides in their heads and refused to say out loud which they were on. A coworker forwarded me Maya's new chapter post as if I might have missed it, adding a thumbs up emoji and, "So happy for you both as you evolve." I closed my laptop and walked around the block until my breath stopped sounding like I was trying not to cry. Aunt Jen called and asked if I needed her lasagna recipe for emergencies. I said yes and then didn't cook it because the last thing my fridge needed was a pan of memories. On a Thursday night, he called. The ex, now the current. I recognized the voice from that party years ago, the last time he'd shaken my hand and said the words men say when they are measuring each other's names. "Ben, hey. It's Lucas." He said my name like he was practicing being gentle. He said we should clear the air. He said he hoped we could be cool. I asked what air he wanted to clear. He said he'd always respected our relationship, then added a sentence that made me feel something twist behind my ribs: "You have to admit it was already over." My mouth made a sound I didn't recognize, a laugh with no humor. I said I didn't have to admit anything. He said we're all adults. I said goodbye. He texted after with a photo of the dog and the caption, "He misses his aunt." I added the text to the file because laughter needs company. Maya wrote the next day, I hate that you and Lucas are having a pissing contest. I wrote back, no contest, just requests to remove your name from accounts. She said, money is such a prison. I said, then please unlock the door by paying what you owe. She didn't answer until midnight with a screenshot of a partial payment and a note, this is what I can do now. I wanted to reply with a small claims link. I wanted to reply with, thank you. I did neither. I replied with, received. Remaining balance attached. I slept badly and woke up having dreamed of standing in a grocery aisle reading labels for something called integrity and not finding it in stock. The thing that finally tilting me out of the stupor wasn't a bill or a text. It was General Fernand. I'd overwatered out of anxiety and he sulked like someone who'd been invited to a party he didn't want to attend. I called a plant shop, and the woman on the other end gave me a lecture on drainage, sunlight, neglect that is actually care. Don't fuss, she said. Let him dry out. He's built for resilience. I wrote that down like a prayer. A week later, Maya asked to come by to talk like humans. We picked Saturday. She arrived wearing the sweatshirt she'd taken from me and returned like a souvenir. She sat on the edge of the couch and talked in paragraphs. I know I handled it poorly. I didn't want to hurt you. I wanted to be honest, but kindness kept getting in the way. She didn't use Lucas's name. She said, the apartment, like it was a force of nature. I didn't ask if it was his name she had whispered in our kitchen months earlier when she said she wanted something else. I didn't ask if the dinner that was just dinner had been a soft launch. I asked for the form with her signature for the utilities. She signed, impatient. I asked about the remaining balance. She said she'd send it when she could. I said I'd take it to small claims if I had to. She rolled her eyes. You're really not going to be a good guy about this? I told her I'd already been the good guy for months and it had just made me an unpaid intern. She flinched and then did what she does best, made a performance of grace. You always choose the ledger over the lyric, she said. That's why we were dying. After she left, I made dinner with the recipe Aunt Jen had sent because the kitchen felt less haunted after paperwork. The lasagna tasted like somebody else's childhood, which was a comfort I didn't know I wanted. I ate 2 squares and put the rest in the freezer for the nights you don't trust yourself to cook. The legal letter came on a Tuesday from the landlord's office, roommate release processed, all future responsibility on me. It felt clean and heavy, like getting the deed to a small, slightly haunted ship. I signed a new lease solo. I moved the couch. I donated 2 chairs. I bought a different lamp out of spite and because the living room finally belonged to my taste. Then came the part one didn't plan for, Lucas being Lucas. 3 weeks into her new chapter, Maya texted at 2:14 a.m., can't sleep. Everything is loud. I didn't reply. At 7:03, another, can I come by to pick up some mail? I said yes because enemies don't share history that includes inside jokes about how my socks never match, and I am bad at being an enemy. She arrived wearing a new ring, not that ring, and looked around like the room had rearranged itself without her. Which it had. She sat. She cried, quietly. She said they had fought about money because irony is a playwright. She said he wanted things, just so. She said his dog loved her but the dog's eyebrows couldn't fix how she felt when she looked at the future. She said their balcony didn't smell like ours in summer, which would have been sweet if it weren't absurd. I did the only true thing I had, I told her I hoped she got what she's actually looking for. She asked if I knew what that was. I said I wasn't her map. She reached for my hand and I let the air between us be the answer. She left with the mail and a hug that landed awkwardly on a shoulder. I locked the door and slid down it and sat on the floor until my legs tingled. Then I stood up, watered General Fernand, lightly, and went to work because rent doesn't care how cinematic your pain is. People ask if I confronted Lucas. I didn't. Not with fists, not with speeches. The only confrontation that mattered was with myself, deciding that being dignified wasn't a costume I put on to make other people clap. The last thing I need is an audience. What I needed, and finally gave myself, was a boundary that didn't require bouncers. I did, however, talk to a lawyer about the remaining balance, and we filed in small claims when the payment plan went the way of "we'll talk later." Court was anticlimax, fluorescent lights, a bored clerk, Maya in a blazer that tried to be neutral. The judge glanced at the lease, my spreadsheet, her text promising to pay, and said the quiet part out loud: "He is owed." A judgment isn't revenge, it's a receipt. She sent the money the following week with a captionless transfer. I wrote "received" and nothing else. Spring came. The alley cat retired or moved to a softer city. The neighbor downstairs learned a new song on guitar that was terrible for 2 weeks and then less terrible. I started running further than the doubt. I bought a second plant that didn't come with a history. I caught myself laughing at nothing in the kitchen and didn't think of it as betrayal. Then, because patterns are patient, another 2 a.m. text: "You were always my calm." I turned the phone face down and slept. In the morning I wrote back a single sentence: "Please don't text me at night." She replied with a heart and nothing else, which is its own kind of cruelty and its own kind of grace. Months later, I saw them on the sidewalk outside a cafe, Maya, Lucas, the dog with the eyebrows. She was in sunglasses, he was in a t-shirt that tried too hard. They looked like a couple in the middle of a conversation they'd been having for years in different rooms. They didn't see me. I watched two people who had told themselves a story and then moved furniture around to match it. I felt angry for the version of me who stood by the sink that first night trying to decide if "just dinner" could be benign. I felt annoyed at how much money and breath I'd spent on someone else's plot. Mostly, surprisingly, I felt free. This isn't a triumph story. It's a ledger, and here's what's on it. Debits, months of doubt, the cost of moving words around until they meant what she wanted, a judgment fee, the bruise of being cast as controlling because I asked for dates and amounts and keys back. Credits, a lease in my name alone, a living room that looks like me, a plant that forgave my fussing, new running routes, a folder called "Record" I barely open anymore because I no longer need proof to trust myself. If you want a lesson, it's not "don't let your partner have dinner with an ex." People who want to cheat will call every boundary insecurity and every calendar entry control. The lesson is duller and harder. When someone asks you to doubt your instincts, ask them to show you a life in which your instincts aren't the only thing that keeps you safe. The lesson is to keep receipts, yes, but also to know when to stop showing them because the person across from you prefers the lyric to the ledger and your sanity needs numbers. She said, "It's just dinner with my ex, stop overreacting." 2 weeks later, she moved in with him. My part of the story is boring on purpose now. I pay rent, I answer emails, I make lasagna and don't cry over the pan. I know where the fork goes. When General Fernand throws a tantrum, I open the window and let the light in and do nothing for a day. It turns out there's a kind of love in that too, the ordinary kind you give yourself when nobody's narrating your life but you.
Follow me for more stories.